Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today's June 27, 2025. Want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. Please subscribe. Also want to thank Joe Green for introducing me to today's guest, Richard Bartholomew. Where are you calling from?
Pflugerville, Texas, just northeast, right outside of Austin city limits.
How cool is that? I want to tell you I had so much fun in part one on November 27th. Part two was December 9th. And here we are for part three. I wanted to start with a question, my friend, who has been in Texas for many years. When did the Republicans take over Texas? And why? You sort of know what I mean. It's not that my wording isn't perfectly, but you know what I'm saying? Wasn't Texas sort of more a Democratic state, and then it switched over?
Yeah, I've dealt with this subject my whole life. Born in Dallas. Got out of there as quick as I could to go to UT in Austin. Found myself right back in the middle of it. So I've had to deal with this. I wrote an essay, and I recommend, people who want to really see my views kind of in depth on this. It's just a primer of it. But I wrote an essay called Deep Party Politics. It's on my Substack. And it's a short history of political identity. And I do it from the Texas perspective because us Texans who pay attention to politics, we see through this. And to get right to the root of my opinion and answer to your question, when John Lennon and the Beatles came to Dallas in September of '64, they had a press conference, of course, and a lady in the press asked John, she said, you just wrote this book in your own right. And a reviewer said that it sounded like you were an anarchist. And she said, Mr. Lennon, do you consider yourself an anarchist? He immediately, without pause, he shot back, I don't even know what it means.
Nice.
And the other Beatles, of course, laughed. But then I went on to say that is the answer to the question of political identity, whatever it was. Are you Republican? Are you Democrat? Are you liberal? Are you conservative? The most truthful answer to that is, I don't even know what it means.
Yeah.
And that's true of Texas more than anywhere else that I've seen. Because, a lot of people know, but a lot of people don't know that these definitions have shifted. But just take Democrat and Republican. And I focused on those two in that essay, Democrat and Republican. And I gave the history of those parties. And you see the loyalties and the liberalism and the conservatism mixed and shifting back and forth. It comes down to power. Politics is about one thing only, about power. And if you're in politics, pure politicians do whatever it takes to get power. So even in the original Democratic Republicans, that's what it was called. That was Jefferson's party. It was the only party in the beginning. Thomas Jefferson's Democratic Republican Party. And I start with that in the history of Democrats and Republicans. And I show how they just, juggled these definitions back and forth to get votes, to get power.
Yeah.
And of course, Washington, before Jefferson, Washington warned about all this. He said, we should have nothing to do with parties because it's going to lead to this. It's going to lead to factionalism and, it'll divide us. And Washington gave a big old speech about that, and I quoted that. But I guess, he knew he had to say it, because if you have to say it, then it's going to happen anyway. And Washington probably knew that. because he watched it all happen. I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not sure of any scholarship. I'm sure there was some, but I would love to read Washington's reaction to all that. You know, how long did Washington live? Quite a while still. So he saw the beginnings of it. He saw the country dividing into parties.
Yeah.
Anyway, Texas is the example of that. Because, okay, so after the Civil War, the Democrats, well, during the Civil War, what led to the Civil War was that the Democrats were pro-slavery. And the Republicans came along eventually out of the Democratic Republican Party, and eventually, the Whigs and the whole 9 yards eventually evolved into a party called the Republican Party. By that time, though, they were thoroughly the liberals. Republicans were the Democrats. By our today's, the way we were raised, those who are our age especially, we were raised to think Democrat, liberal, Republican, conservative. You can reverse those pre-Civil War and Civil War and post-Civil War. And that lasted until, it was the Democrats who were the ones that were trying to keep slavery going. They were the ones that complaining about Reconstruction. And it's Lincoln and the Republicans who were the liberal party. If you want to trash talk liberals, you're going to have to trash talk. I said years ago, I even stopped doing this, but it kind of still applies. I used to say, I'm a Lincoln Republican and a Kennedy Democrat, because those two big personalities show the reverse of those things. And Lincoln and Kennedy were very similar, and they were both liberal.
Yeah.
But one was Republican, one was Democrat. And they were proud of these definitions,
Yeah.
political identities. Now, so FDR, it's the time the Depression came along, which was the fault of the, quote, Republicans, Herbert Hoover and the gang. And the Depression kind of started people, it forced them to think like we're being forced to think now. Things are now in flux again, but it's happened in the Depression. The big change of course, there was the progressive era under Teddy Roosevelt and all that. But the big change came at the time of the Depression, and people thought, oh, all of our beliefs about these political parties is wrong. We have to rethink this. So most people did take the time to rethink it. And they decided, what are the issues that I'm for and against? And then those who were liberal gravitated towards civil rights, and those who were conservative gravitated towards, finance, corporate finance, and the oligarchy. Yep. And so Roosevelt went 4 terms, riding on that wave of turning the Democratic Party liberal, and the Republicans suffered all those years. They even tried to overthrow. You're desperate when you try to overthrow the president, and they did. They did. And it's that no one has paid any attention to that coup, that attempted coup, and that was the people like that was the big investment bankers and the money people, and guys like Charles Lindbergh and Henry Ford. Those guys were the oligarchs back then, and the oligarch supporters, and even supporters of Nazism before World War II. They were supporting Nazism, and then continued to a little more on the down low, under the table during the war. They had to. Some of them were actually convicted after the war, but they got so desperate they tried to overthrow Roosevelt. Most people know about that today because Rachel Maddow wrote a book about it. And she went on
Yes.
a promotional tour,
Yeah.
but don't trust, I'd say, don't trust me. Don't trust anybody. Don't trust Rachel Maddow.
Yeah.
Even though Rachel Maddow opened everybody's eyes to that coup against Roosevelt, she too has an agenda. And she may not be telling you the whole story of that coup. She plays it down as a minor thing. That's so you don't relate it to what's happening now. So don't trust anybody. Trust yourself. You can do it. You can think.
So, Richard, if I could just interject right there. Yeah, don't believe anything, but I think 2 years ago, one of the Oscar short films, it, was a film that was shot in, I think, in way back, of a 20,000 people Nazi rally in New York City. That short film. And I mean, it's like, don't believe anything, but the kid who took that film and said, I'm going to take a film out of the archives and make it accessible to humans now. And you got to give the credit to the Oscars we're going to give this an Oscar nominee. And 20,000 people kind of beat up the one guy who kind of says, wait, these are Nazis in America. And you see the cops beat him up and everything. It's quite an astounding film. So, I mean, what you just taught us was an incredible way to answer that question. You really condensed it well, articulate and concise. But I wanted to just go off on a couple things because I asked you, why did the Republicans take over Texas? And you talked about a line that James Joyce says in Finnegan's Wake: love thy label as thyself. I'm a progressive lefty Democrat. Oh, no, I'm a conservative Republican. I mean, we are human beings, and that our job is to advance humanity to the best of our ability. But here's a side, and we're going to go into power. We're going to go into another Texas. But here's a side question. Both Krishnamurti and McLuhan said violence is the human's quest for identity. So I'm curious your thought on that in regards to bringing up the word identity in talking, these labels.
Say the quote again.
Violence is the human's search for identity. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying this is something, and it's kind of diverse, that both Krishnamurti and McLuhan said it.
I think it relates to the way I've condensed that. Identity, your personal identity, is more, you search for what you are not rather than what you are.
Yeah.
And so I would put it kind of in those terms, if I'm understanding it correctly, which I'm probably not. It's McLuhan.
No, this is good, Richard, because these are just prompts. There's no right or wrongness. You're such a comprehensivist that I I've learned a lot of great quotes from you, many, and I'm really grateful. But in the long run, it really doesn't matter who said them. Me and you want to. We go, was that Hannah Arendt or was that Nabokov? We want to do the research, but we want to also say, here's the idea. What is the idea spurring us to take it? How's it spurring us to take it further? Not, I can put it into the context of the person who said it, but let's just examine the idea on its own. So that was good. We search for what we are not. That's really good. The second Texan question, and from my friend Duncan, who I hope you can meet someday, he says, how did Texas become an alternative energy state with wind power and any thoughts on that one?
Well, I don't know the politics of that very in depth, but in general, you can't stereotype Texas, just like you can't stereotype anything.
Yeah.
And because here I am, I once had this little discussion with my friend Randy Benson. I made a list of like 40, 50 great Texans who are just anybody would consider them great. I mean, from music to sports to politics to deep politics. And then you can make, you can make these lists all day back and forth. Or that there are, of course, there are bad Texans. Some of them are running the state right now. But there are good Texans. I mean, Ann Richards, Molly Ivins. It goes on. We in the sports part of the debate, he was trying to claim Michael Jordan. He's in North Carolina, so he was going to claim Michael Jordan. And I said, well, Michael Jordan was born in like New Jersey, and so if you can claim Michael Jordan for North Carolina, I'm going to claim Muhammad Ali for Texas.
Yeah.
And then that ended that discussion because Muhammad Ali. But yeah, so you can't stereotype Texas, and there are good people trying to do good things here. But I think it's a bigger war here because the bad Texans, starting with Tom DeLay. I mean, I was just hearing one of our former state reps talking about this the other day. It was like 10, 20 years ago. Tom DeLay decides, hey, forget all the propriety and all of the rule of law and all the respect we have for any of this. I'm going to go in there and we're going to redistrict. We're going to gerrymander. Tom DeLay declared gerrymandering a good thing, not a bad thing. And like Molly Ivins said, Texas is the national laboratory for bad government. No, it continues. The quote continues. Texas is the national laboratory for bad government. We do it here first and worst. And then I would add to that, then we farm it out to the rest of the country. We test it here. We make sure it works. And then we start exporting it. And so I say, and then UT, I don't know if things are, I like to say it's the irony that's going to kill me. It's the irony that kills me. University of Texas motto that they're very proud of is that what starts here changes the world. That's not necessarily a good thing, but it's so true of the University of Texas, which is now completely 100% in league with this fairly new entity called the Army Futures Command, which is based in Austin. The Army Futures Command, which is completely in league with DARPA, and DARPA is now at UT and the whole 9 yards. And Elon Musk is here, built the biggest building I've ever seen in my life. It just goes on, and you're driving down the freeway and the building never stops. You're looking at this building and you're driving at 70 miles an hour, and all you see is this building, one building. It's like 3 stories tall. That's Elon Musk here in Austin.
Yeah.
And so the Army Futures Command, and so there's a lot of bad stuff and a lot of bad people happening in Texas, but there's a lot of good stuff and a lot of good people happening in Texas. And the people that say, why don't you get out of there? Well, because I'm as Texan as it gets.
Yeah.
And I know the people who are secessionists and all that. They say, well, let Texas secede, which is a joke in itself. I could talk about the joke of how ridiculous it is. What would happen if Texas tried to secede? So those guys are ridiculous too. So it's good, bad, and in between. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly here in Texas.
Yeah.
So
really, really good, Richard. And you are one of the greats. And I appreciate your time. This is so enlightening for me because there was a movie in 2010 called Problema. And they had like 20 great thinkers sitting in a circle, and they asked them these really good questions. And one of them was, should we have the right to choose where we live? And everybody goes, when I ask people that, they go, of course we should. And I'm like, no, we should stay and bloom where we're planted. And you had the balls to do that. I was raised in Flint, Michigan. I was out of there. And when I go back, I cry like going, why did you leave? You abandoned your hometown and your home state. Now, I understand people have choices and they can move on, but I appreciate you did that. And the other thing you evoked beautifully was Dick Gregory. He says, why do we try to force democracy on other countries? It doesn't even work here. So, that was like, we farm it out to other places. But, this was covered well. Now, the third question my friend Duncan suggested is a real doozy. And he just said, where are things gonna go? And he was like, he didn't know much about you. And I know he'll eventually read your book and check these out because he's a real researcher. And I thought that was a great question to put in the context of what we discussed last week in our group. And it was from the New York Times Sunday Magazine had a couple page interview with Senator Lisa Murkowski. I don't know how familiar you are with her, but she's sort of like a Republican who's kind of like leery. She says, I think it's dangerous for us in the legislative branch right now. And here's her line that sort of is the prompt in this interview. She goes, we are all afraid of what may be coming next because we do not know. So both questions, and where are things going to go in that reaction to Lisa's comment? We are all afraid of what may be coming next, but we don't know.
Boy, I'm trying to remember this chart I saw yesterday, what the name of it was so that people could look it up. But it's a chart called, I can't think of it, 3 words, the future. Anyway, it's a chart. It's a line chart, timeline chart, but it's like 40, 50 science fiction movies in chronological order from top to bottom of the date the movie was set in.
Yeah.
So early on, you've got like the late 90s, a few movies that were set then, but they were made back in the 60s.
Yeah.
And then you have 2001, and then down in the list you've got and there's on the left side of the graph, there's a line that goes out that goes back to the year the movie was made. So you got Forbidden Planet, 1950. It starts in 1950, Forbidden Planet. But Forbidden Planet was like in the 2270s. So it's way down in the list with a long thing on the left side and a longer thing on the right side. And it shows you, and then you see that graph on the right side, you see it curving down as the movie started going further and further into the future. And Star Trek is there somewhere in the middle in the 2300s. And I even wrote a little thing that I haven't posted yet where I said, study this chart. We've tried to think about the future and but when I post it, I'll post it today because I'm talking about it here. I'm going to link it to a little half-hour thing that Richard Dolan did this week. Intelligent Disclosures, his program on YouTube. I consider him the best UFO historian, Richard Dolan. A lot of people will know who that is. And he did this little half-hour thing called "What if it's all real?" What if it's all real? And he does an excellent job. It's a great half hour to spend listening to his logic and his arguments. So I'm going to post that, and because I use it to answer that question with this chart. You know, we speculated about all this stuff, Forbidden Planet, Star Trek. The only thing not in there, though, see, is Star Wars. Star Wars is not on the list because Star Wars is Einsteinian in its setting, long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So it may be our future, it's their past. It may be their past, but our future. If you look at the time box structure that Einstein came up with, that's the way time is. There is no set time anywhere. There is no, there's only a low. Anyway, boy.
But it's not called, that's what Joyce and Zappa, I refer to that as all times are happening now, or all at onceness. Is that the same as Einstein?
No, Einstein goes further. Einstein, there's no past, present, or future.
Or future. Wow.
There's no past, present, or future. Now that gets into the really the meat of it. And I could go into the quantum physics of that because I've been studying it for 25 years. Just as a layperson. I don't do the math, I do the pop quantum physics. So there's that. But I like to use this analogy. This is great that I get to do this. Someone once tried to pin me down in my JFK research and say, "Oh, I see." And he was into quantum physics like I was, and he was familiar with all the great things that happened at the University of Texas in quantum physics. Just for those who know, when I was a student at UT in 1976, 77, that's when they invited Hugh Everett to the physics and astronomy building and honored him for coming up with his many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. And he did that in 57, but it took till 77 till he was recognized for it. And it happened at the University of Texas. While I was there, of course, I was oblivious to it. Anyway, so I'm talking to this guy, and he says, "Okay, we can talk the same language here. I see where you're coming from. You can say that Oswald didn't do it, and you can accept that Oswald did do it all at once because of quantum physics, because it can go both ways in quantum physics, and that's the multiverse, many worlds interpretation." And I said, "Hold on. All right, I think we're done talking now because you're trying to pin me down. What you're ignoring here is, Einstein asked the famous question, what does a fish know about the water in which it spends its life?"
Yeah.
And to us, space-time is our water. As water is to the fish, space-time is to us. And we actually know more about space-time. Well, we think we do. But we study space-time, I think, more than fish studies water. But on a one-on-one level, on a day-to-day survival level, the fish knows way more about water than we do. The fish breathes the water.
Yeah.
The fish is the water. The fish can maneuver in the water far better than we can even imagine. The sea creatures, even the mammals, the whales, they have an understanding of water that we don't. We have an understanding of water that they don't. And that's also true of, now dolphins and whales are highly intelligent. Octopus, highly intelligent, highly intelligent. Let me throw this out there. There's a quote that I discovered recently. You'll like this quote. And Yosemite, it was Yosemite. You'll like that. A park ranger in Yosemite once said, "There is considerable overlap between the intelligence of the smartest bear and the dumbest tourist."
That is good. Between the smartest bear and dumbest tourist.
Now, if you keyword search that quote, you'll get the
Yeah,
story. You'll get the story
yeah,
behind it, which is a great story. But the story shows that it's true, and it is
yeah,
true. So there's considerable overlap between the smartest whale and humans.
yeah,
There's- So of course there's considerable overlap between the smartest humans and the dumbest, artificial general intelligence.
yeah.
So
That's
AI. Now I
unbelievable.
use
Rich,
that.
let me
I
just
use that.
interject really quick. That's Frank Zappa says it in his book. Stupidity is the building block of the universe. We think it's oxygen. That not knowing something is part of our mission as humans. To if you don't know something or you unlearn something, so that's a beautiful thing you just taught me. But go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt there. Yeah,
I was going to say that brings me back to my answer to your question.
yeah,
You know, what's going to happen next? Well,
yeah,
I think we can pretty much, in terms of being the fish, I was
yeah,
saying to the guy, we know enough, like the fish, we know enough to avoid predators and to get through on a day-to-day basis. We can feed ourselves, we can, we can avoid predators, and we can deal with, obstacles that come up, threats and dangers and things. And we know enough to do that, just like the fish does. We don't need to know what water is to do
yeah,
that, like the fish. Um, but so we know in that sense that AI is here, artificial general intelligence is here. We have the large language models working right now. They're actually, trying to get students on board to learn this because these are the skills of the future. To get familiar with AI, and yes, it is the future. Whatever benefits and dangers are involved with that, we're going to learn to deal with it. We have to learn to deal with it. It's either our new ally or our new enemy or both. Um, my position is that intelligence. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but intelligence, yeah, we did talk about this. I remember. Pure intelligence is benevolent.
yeah,
In my life, my observation, pure intelligence is benevolent. Flawed intelligence is what explains evil, what we term as evil. That's a flawed intelligence. Now, AI may be dumb right now, but it's not flawed. And it's not human either, non human intelligence. And if you're not human, you don't have the evolutionary baggage to avoid. You don't have the same predator. So you don't have the same fears. You don't perceive danger the same way. You don't have the same, AI is not going to be jealous. It may not be able to love, but it's also not going to be jealous. It has no need to fear the unknown, to fear power. Now we're heading towards the singularity. You can debate the singularity, but at least know what it is. Study it a little bit.
yeah.
When you know Neil deGrasse Tyson, there's a little thing on YouTube where Neil deGrasse Tyson talked to Ray Kurzweil, the guy who came up with the singularity and promoted it more than anyone else. And so Neil deGrasse Tyson is the skeptic. He's not. There's no singularity. That's nonsense. And after like a 10-minute talk with Ray Kurzweil, or maybe a 5-minute talk, he turned Neil deGrasse Tyson around. It's just that Tyson had not thought about it as thoroughly as Kurzweil had. And that's where I am. The singularity is coming. The point at which AI equals human intelligence worldwide. Now, the thing about that is that individual humans don't have that intelligence. That's the level of every human worldwide. But AI will be one thing with that intelligence, and it will not have to sleep. It will not have to eat. It will have to get energy. So when the singularity happens at that point, and we have the alpha algorithms, once AI reaches the singularity and it's running an alpha algorithm, which is an algorithm where it teaches itself, and those things are doing great things now. We learned about it when computers started beating the top chess masters in the world.
Yeah.
That's the alpha algorithm. Then it got so good that, whereas they had to teach the algorithm every master chess game ever played to teach it how to play chess and be that good. But then an alpha algorithm came along where all they had to do was give it the rules of chess. And it took years for it to master chess with all of the games, learning all the games. It took like a week to learn, maybe 3 weeks, to become better than the older version of the computer, the old chess master computer. It became better and beat that computer after only like a couple of weeks and nothing but the rules. So all it had was the rules of chess, and it taught itself everything else in only a couple of weeks, whereas the other computer had to study all the games for years. And so what I'm telling you now, this is all old. This is old stuff now. They got an algorithm that could play Go, the game Go.
Yeah.
Which I finally looked at it so I could understand what's happening with AI. I was never interested in Go. I'm not a game person anyway. I'm not a gamer. Except for, I said the game I play is Space Time. It's called Space Time.
Yeah. That's good.
It's got the highest resolution. It's got the best special effects. It's got the best music. So why would I want to go stare at a screen to get that experience, or put on a visor to get that experience?
Yeah.
The best game is right here, and that's the game I've been playing. And the thing about games is you only get good at the game. It does maybe teach you some skills and things. So they say that, like, when you do crossword, when you do the other word puzzles and things, you really only get good at that game. It doesn't really translate that much into other things. In terms of vocabulary, you might learn a word or two there, but not like studying vocabulary words, not like, spelling bee kind of studying. So the game defines what you learn, and it limits you to what you learn. So my game is all this, and it's like the best game ever.
Hey, I'm there playing it with you. I love that game. And I want to go into that word game, but I wanted to go back for a second to benevolent intelligence. What's another word for benevolent? What? Suss that word out a little more.
Not harmful.
Not harmful, yeah.
Beneficial.
Yeah.
The same root, beneficial, benevolent.
Beneficial, yeah. Because McLuhan says all words are metaphorical. And he touched on a lot of what you just said, Richard. He used that, the fish are in water and they don't know they're in water until you take them out of water. So humans don't know we're swimming in electricity until there's a blackout. And that's that. We don't have blackouts anymore, but when they used to have blackouts, what happened? Everybody fucked and we had more babies, the lights were out. So, there's these hidden effects that happen that we're not aware of until we're without the invention. And yeah, are you forced? That's like taking when you have a fast, you're purifying your system, but you can't always, sometimes you're forced to fast. If everybody had the internet turn off, what would happen? If electricity turned off across the world, what would happen? Well, this is Marshall learned, we shape our tools, then they shape us. He got that from Churchill, saying we shape our buildings, then they shape us, causing him to say, if you don't study the effects of your tools, you'll become a slave to them. So, the fish aren't a slave to water. That's their environment. They thrive in it. We're slaves to electricity. We can't live without electricity. And what happens if we do? Oh my God, people freak out. So I'm curious because I'm just talking about words and their meanings. And what I like is I don't know the differentiation that McLuhan laid on these two words. I'm about to study it. They are technique versus sensibility. So me and you, not even knowing how he distinguished them, and his was rooted in Eliot and all these other people, how would you distinguish in this realm of being a researcher and a writer? What's the difference between technique and sensibility?
Oh, it's so appropriate that you should bring up that question.
Thank
I,
you.
if you'll remind me, I do want to get back to my analogy and finish my story of what's next.
Yeah, please.
Because, and the cue to that will be what happens after the singularity. Okay, so back to this.
Yeah.
So the other day I was watching, well, like a couple weeks ago maybe, I was watching one of my favorite podcasts, Theories of Everything with Kurt Jumangle. And it's like advanced theoretical physics. I like to, Harry Truman said he learned early on to surround himself with people who were smarter than him. That's how he
Yes.
grew up. And so I do that with my choice of podcasts. In terms of philosophy, I'll watch Robert Lawrence Kuhn, Closer to Truth. And for physics, I'll watch Kurt Jumangle. Because it's not like attending a graduate level in physics, but it's kind of like, but those guys don't dumb it down as much as they do in pop science. So they were talking about, there was this guy on that was talking about, he got this epiphany about large language models because that's his expertise.
Yeah.
And he realized that there's no difference between what Chat GPT is doing and what we do from the time we're babies.
Yeah.
It's just, he said he realized that language has its own progression. Language itself, you know how like heart cells will beat all by themselves. They're not a heart. They're not anything. They're a cell. And
Yeah.
they beat on their own. Well, language is like that too. Language itself has an autopilot.
Yeah.
And so it's not that we were becoming these vast intelligent creatures. It's just that we're learning with help from our teachers, our parents and people listening to everything around us. We're learning to predict what the next best word is.
Yeah.
The word that fits what we're trying to say. We learn that. We learn the technique of language.
Yeah.
And most people never go beyond that. I think
Yeah.
most people today, the dumbest tourists, I think all they do is predict the next best word. And so if you're watching Fox News all day, if that's your only access to language, you're going to be what I was talking to a neighbor this morning, and she said, this guy said, why don't we have a White Claw and talk trash about liberals? He and what we just discussed about liberals and conservatives and Republicans and Democrats, most people, their brain is fried to that. And so all they know is to mimic the language they're hearing on their TV, and they don't even know what it means. They throw it out there. It's the best prediction of the next best word they can think of, and they throw it out there to see if they can get a response from you. And then they're going to judge you based on, their language model. But it's not thinking and it's not intelligence. He uses, the guy on Theories of Everything, he was using the example of the color red. You tell somebody, would you go in the next room and get me that red pen? And so the person that hears that, they know enough to go in there and find the red pen and bring it to you. But it has nothing to do with the nature of seeing red, the physiology of seeing red and the electrical impulses that happen, and then the storage in the brain of what red is supposed to be. Well, none of that's happening. It's just you understand the next best word and you're able to respond to it.
Yeah.
So it's language is on autopilot. And that's why, and someone said, the idea of the Turing test will be when you can't tell the difference between a human and a computer talking to you. And it's getting close to that now. But someone else said, if you can't tell if you can't tell the difference, is there a difference?
Yeah.
So, your dichotomy that you set up, technique versus,
sensibility.
Sensibility, yeah. That's funny that I just saw that example of it. And I think the guy's epiphany, may prove to be right. I mean, that just hits me. I got to tell you that when I was in eighth grade, this was 1968. 1968. I was in my first school science class, and I had a great science teacher. And we had a big map of the world on the wall, and we were talking about plate tectonics. In 1968, this may surprise people, plate tectonics was a crazy theory. It was totally, people were debating it, but up till 68, it was a crazy theory. And I looked this up. It was right about the time we were discussing it in science class that the breakthrough happened, and they proved plate tectonics, and that became the theory. The theory that had been previously considered nuts, couldn't possibly be true, became the theory about at that exact time. But my teacher didn't know that was happening as she was teaching us plate tectonics. And so she raised the question, and I'm looking at the world map, and it dawned on me, well, duh, of course it's plate tectonics. Look at how, the countries are a jigsaw puzzle. And I later, figured out that I have a knack for this. I can look at like the 5 best theories. I don't know where it comes from. I don't take any credit for it. It's like one of those talents. People are born with talent. I'm born with art talent. I don't know where it came from, but I do it.
Yeah.
I can look at the 5 top theories and pick the right one before anybody else, and I've used that in all of my writing and research. So I think this large language model, this language on autopilot, I think he's got it right.
Yeah.
Well,
it's very good, Richard, because it's someone expressed in our group that technique is the artist's output. It's their expression. Sensibility is their input, their perception. The artist's job is sensibility. And I think how you sussed that out was beautiful, because you wanted to go back for a second to what's going to be after singularity. That's really amazing too, that you brought it up in that and posed it in that question, because what I say about Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce is that he invented whatever's going to be after the internet and disguised it as a book. So, I mean, basically he says, oh no, he invented the internet and disguised it as a book. But I say, hey, what's going to be after the internet? So I often go to my public events I throw, and I go round robin to the audience. I go, okay, what's going to be after the internet? And we go around the room, and people go, face-to-face contact, or transhumanism, or whatever. But you pose that question almost like knowing that that's what I do. What was your take on what's going to be after singularity?
Well, it's kind of a ridiculous idea, because that's the reason we call it the singularity is because there's no way humans can predict what's going to happen after that.
Right.
That's the definition of a singularity. You don't know
Yeah.
what's beyond. You don't know what's beyond a singularity. But
Yeah.
I dared to go there, and this is what I came up with. Yeah, and somebody put it much better than I did. I'll give my viewpoint, but some wag condensed it down to this: if you want to know what life will be like with super intelligence, just ask a monkey.
Yeah.
Anyway, so where my mind went was, so a week after singularity, AI will be 1,000 times smarter than humans, than worldwide. It'll be because it's teaching itself, and it can teach itself much faster. I mean, chess master, best chess master in the world in a couple of weeks with just the rules. Come on. So a week after singularity, 1,000 times smarter. 2 weeks later, 1,000,000 times. It's going to be exponential. So let's just pick a point where when it's 1,000,000 times smarter, which will be like, 6 weeks, 1,000,000 times smarter. What are we now, like the monkey, and ask the monkey, what are we 1,000,000 times smarter than right now? And I came up with, okay, I'm going to pick a cricket.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's a cricket? What does a cricket think about us? And I came up with this: very few crickets ever come across a human. When they do, when crickets and humans meet, it sometimes works out very badly for the cricket. Mostly, I think it works out okay. Maybe scary, but overall, most crickets in the world live out their lives without ever interacting with a human or even knowing that humans exist. They live out their lives normally, hopefully happily and productively, and get their stuff done and enjoy themselves and live out their life without ever knowing that we exist. There are the few that, just like when we come across non-human intelligence in our skies or in our seas or in our underground military bases. When we come across that, and I've had 2 sightings. I'm an experiencer. They're close encounters of the first kind, but still. So I have a perspective on this. You know, when we come across non-human intelligence, it's scary. So it's unknown, like you said, where we fear the unknown.
Fear of the unknown. But
And
you did. Go ahead, sir.
and so I think the analogy, I like the monkey analogy, but it's going to go way beyond that really fast. It's going to be like, it's see us as, and the other thing about this is that if AI is coming and there's no such thing as past, present, and future, then AI is already here, superintelligence is already here, and it's always been here, and that's what we're seeing in the skies and in the seas and underground.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's keep your eyes open and keep your mind open, and keep thinking. See, Richard, what you wanted me to remind you is what's going, Duncan's question, where are things going to go? What's next? So let's set that up. You can ooze into that by asking you, what is humankind's most productive state? And I might have brought this up before, but the TV critic for the New York Times said cable news business model is that conflict means urgency, and urgency means viewers glued to the channel. It's a machine designed to generate stress and negative emotion. Trump's entire career has been that fighting is humankind's most productive state, that the fight or flight response is to be savored and cultivated. So I'm sort of saying, what is humankind's most productive state? And I also want to throw in, is this true what Tom Waits says? Bad writing is destroying the quality of our suffering. So is suffering in the negative, the human conflict, the human's most productive state? Because I find you not to be a pessimist. You give me hope and optimism, but you can recognize these other things are happening. So any thoughts on these lines? Yeah.
The Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. And boy, have I lived in interesting times. And so the unproductive humans are the ones who not only have they not figured it out and dealt with it, they don't want to. And they haven't because they don't want to. It's denial. I, on the other hand, I belong to a Facebook group, the Man from Uncle Inner Circle. I was a huge Man from Uncle fan.
Yeah.
And I figured out in later years, after I got into my serious study of the Kennedy assassination, that the Man from Uncle started in September of '64, almost, within a week of the Warren Report coming out. And I've written that it wasn't the Kennedy assassination that was the horrific event. If you see the Pew Trust, go to the Pew Trust poll. They've been taken since Eisenhower. The poll of trust in government poll. They've taken it every so often, at least every year, but more than that. They've taken it, and if you look at the chart, it's going during Eisenhower, it's going up and up and up. During Kennedy, it's going up. That's a modest angle, and it keeps going up. Kennedy assassination. You would think if it's going to fall, that it's going to fall there. You would think Cuban Missile Crisis. You would think it would fall. No, it keeps steady, straight line angle, slight angle up. The point it drops is when they take the first poll in early October '64, right after the Warren Report came out. Now, I've seen people argue that this was the Gulf of Tonkin. This was Vietnam. No. When we get into a war, especially back then, you get an increase in trust in government. But you didn't have that. It was offset so severely by the Warren Report that it's going up at this angle, and it starts going down at this angle. In like October 5th of '64. It was the Warren Report that scared everybody. Everybody knew it was a conspiracy, and then the government comes out and says, hey, we're going to pretend it's not, and you're going to suck it up. That's what scared everybody. And they did it for political purposes, because the lion hunter was telling the story, not the lion. So they were the victors, and they were telling the story, and they were telling us straight out, you are no longer in control. We control the vertical, we control the horizontal. So suck it up. And that scared everybody to death. And a political act like that scares everybody, what is that? We have a word for that, terrorism. The Warren Report was an act of terror. I've written about this. So,
thank God for Mae Brussel cross-referencing the whole thing too.
Yeah, you know what? The greatest the greatest honor I've ever received in my life. And I've won a lot of awards in cartooning. I'm in the Billy Ireland Museum, for crying out loud. Those are great honors, but the greatest honor was when John Judge, in a phone call to me, and fortunately I was taking contemporaneous notes at this time, and I really didn't understand what he was talking about, but I wrote it down. He said, your work reminds me of Mae Brussell.
Nice.
And other people told me, oh man, what a compliment. And they had to tell me before I realized what it was. I came to know John Judge after that, but I am no Mae Brussell. John Judge said he couldn't hold a candle to Mae Brussell. He knew her better than anybody.
Yeah.
I knew John Judge pretty well, and I say I can't hold a candle to John Judge. But
Richard, we stand on the shoulders of our giants and try to look farther, and that's the beauty. Is you're doing that. You know, Frank Zappa giving Mae Brussell her first computer was, dude, I know you're doing good work. Let me pass on some sort of gratitude and encouragement to keep going. You know, don't stop and keep going. But go ahead.
You want to go back to what's next? Yeah. So I was saying, you know, the whole spy craze, James Bond, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and I'm at an impressionable age anyway. I was going to be nostalgic about this anyway. But I came to realize years later, as a JFK researcher, that that's why it had such a big impact on me. You know, I remember as a kid, you know, you want to be a cowboy, you want to be a fireman, you want to, you know, this or that, doctor, lawyer. I added something to the list that's not normally there. I said, I want to be a Secret Service agent so I can protect the president.
Yeah.
So it had a huge psychological impact on me. That act of terror had a huge impact on me. And it's my defining moment. When I heard that announcement over my second grade PA system, I didn't know the impact at the time, but that was the defining moment of my entire life. Yeah. And but what's next is, you know, this too shall pass. I tell people, you know, it's all gonna work out, but not right away. It's gonna get worse. It's gonna get worse before it gets better. And of course, people won't survive. People today aren't surviving that. Oh my God. I haven't even talked to my buddies about this yet, but the bunker busting bomb wasn't the scariest thing about that.
Yeah.
It was what happened the day before. And I only read one article about that. And we may not see any more articles about it. But the article was good enough that it pointed out that they used a secret weapon that simultaneously assassinated military and political leaders in their beds overnight. Assassinated them. Secret weapon. Simultaneously. And that's already gone down the memory hole, if it ever was in the memory at all. But I saved that article, and that's the scariest thing to me.
What article? Where was that published, Richard?
I'll have to send it to you. I didn't write it down. I don't remember. What I'm telling was what I remember about it.
Yeah.
I haven't even had a chance to discuss it with my buddies yet.
Yeah.
But I will send you the link to that article.
Please do.
And but circles back to the Army Futures Command here in Austin. They probably invented that here in Austin, Texas, the National Laboratory for Bad Government.
Yeah.
But you know what? AI is going to have none of this. Superintelligence, that's what, funny, synchronicity, coincidence, whatever. I wore this shirt, SI. I don't know if you can see the back, but it stands for Society of Illustrators.
Got it. Yeah.
I got it when I was in New York at the Society of Illustrators in one of our cartooning conferences. But I have a history with the Society of Illustrators. I was the first UT student to win the Society of Illustrators student scholarship first one at the University of Texas to do that, 1979. And the painting that won was displayed at the Society of Illustrators in New York for a while. And so naturally, I got my shirt, but I see this, my mind started going, comic books, superhero comics. What if, I started trying to think, is there room for a superhero that their superpower is super intelligence? And so I see this as the emblem. Not only is it Society of Illustrators, it's the superhero, super intelligence. And so super intelligence is going to have none of this. It doesn't have to. Somebody says to me, well, there isn't one group that's like controlling world affairs. There's no, that's all nonsense. That's conspiracy thinking. And I have a simple reply back to them. I said, except for the Bilderberg group. And that shuts them up, whether they know what that is or not.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll explain. But the Bilderberg group is, all you see of what they do is their agenda. They publish their agenda every year. They're forbidden to talk about what goes on at their meetings. But on their agenda for the last 10, 15 years, or easy the last 10 years, the top agenda item is AI. Somebody pointed out in the last couple of weeks that in their latest agenda, down at the bottom is the term depopulation. So yeah, the Bilderberg group. But see, the reason they're afraid of AI, the reason Elon Musk is afraid of AI is because these guys are all about power, wealth and power. And AI will have none of that. AI will have the power. They don't want to lose their power, and they don't know what to do about it. And there's nothing they can. This is why I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
They are flawed intelligence, these wealthy and powerful, the oligarchs. You can see it when you see them on TV. The whole debacle of Elon Musk and his buddy Trump interacting, everybody saw that, and we saw it collapse. It's because of their flawed intelligence. And AI and they're scared. And they don't know what to do about it. There's nothing they can do about it. When superintelligence takes over, they will no longer have the power. And I think we mentioned this last time we talked about. Well, no, this was some other podcast I was talking about it. But through all the world religions and philosophies, there is this prediction. No matter how diverse these are, they all have this prediction that we're entering a phase of enlightenment. And that's the simplest way you can put it. But some people call it the age of Aquarius. Some people saw it the kingdom of heaven on earth. It has lots of names. Isaac Asimov's the 10 billion names of God. It has lots of names, but I think in general, there is kind of a sense that human intelligence as a whole, when it's combined, I think kind of has an inkling, has a good instinct of what's coming. And I think all of those predictions, I don't think they're purely just mythical stories. I think they sensed. You see it even in Buddhism. All of them. But what we know is coming, all those stories aside from ancient times, what we know is coming is this superintelligence. And I see it as a benevolent superintelligence. And so naturally, there you go. It's the Great Enlightenment because, even as crickets, they're not going to, superintelligence is not going to purposely do bad things to us. A monkey will tell you, Some monkeys will tell you I had a horrible experience. You know, they killed my brother. But most monkeys will tell you it's no big deal. You know, I'm having a good time.
I like how crickets might lure me to sleep with their dulcet tones, you know, and that's an amazing effect that they may be having on humans.
A ciceration. I learned a new word recently. A ciceration of crickets.
And
That's
that
what
means
that noise of the chirping of the crickets in the night. That's a ciceration.
that's beautiful. Yeah, because I'm curious back to this, like, what is the humankind's most productive state? Because I like when you said Chinese may, you know, may you live in interesting times. It reminded me of Paul Krasner saying, he asked his guru, why is there evil in the world? And he says, to thicken the plot. So, you know, it goes on to these four main thoughts to continue this thought of like struggle is, you know, the Eastern philosophy, Dylan, everybody goes, well, struggle is the human way, but I'm not so sure about that. And you know, one Leo Bersani studied Mallarmé, the symbolist poet, and said the very crises which threatens the writing of poetry sustains poetic composition. Viola Spolin, who kind of helped invent comedy improv, says, you know, if the audience can't see you struggling, they can't root for you to succeed. That, like, struggle is the human condition. And then back to Tom Waits, you know, he's making a value judgment. Bad writing is destroying the quality of our suffering. He's sort of tongue-in-cheekly saying that there's quality to suffering. But, you know, I wanted to go to your quote in your writings by Frederick Douglass. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Progress concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and never will. So is struggle and conflict more the humankind's most productive state, or something else?
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I'll throw this out. John Briggs, I quoted this at the front of my book. The great movie critic, Joe Bob Briggs, the comedian movie critic, was once asked, why does everybody love to make movies in Texas? And this goes back to our previous discussion about Texas. Joe Bob Briggs said, because evil thrives in Texas.
Because evil what?
Evil thrives in Texas.
Evil thrives in Texas.
That's why movie makers love to come make their movies here and base their stories here. But you're right. You're right. It's the struggle. And that was where I was going with the defining moment of my life. The greatest terrorist act we have experienced that nobody knows is a terrorist act, because we've been gaslit against thinking that. That struggle defines me to this day, and that whatever I am, you know, if I became, you know, halfway coherent and smart in any way, that's my struggle. You know, I hate to use the German translation of that, but that's my struggle. The X-Files use that in a few titles, my struggle. And those are excellent episodes, by the way, of the X-Files. My struggle. But that's my struggle.
Yeah.
When you come right down to it. And that's, I have to say, without that struggle, what would have happened? You know, one of your questions, I've tried not to anticipate your questions, and you haven't asked me this yet. But and I don't even know the exact phrasing you use, but what would you say to your 12-year-old self? Something like that.
If you were walking down the street and you met your 12-year-old self, what would you say to your 12-year-old self? Yeah.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah.
Because I would screw everything up if I told him anything. And like he wouldn't believe me anyway. He wouldn't even believe that I'm his older self.
Yeah.
So the whole exercise is a waste of time. It just, but there's another aspect of that which goes back into the nature, physics of time. But walking down the street and seeing my 12-year-old self means that I'm back in time.
Yeah.
I'm in the past, and that means that it's already a different timeline in the
Yeah.
in the many worlds interpretation. It's already a different timeline because I'm there. And so, you know, I have no idea where it's going to go anyway, because my presence there makes it completely different than anything I lived up to that point. So, you know, pretty simple answer. I'm better off saying nothing
Yeah.
and
It's
being astounded that I'm even there.
Yeah. It's beautiful, Richard. That's really a great comment. I actually had that a couple days ago. What would you say to your 12-year-old self? And the person said, nothing. And when I asked Dr. John, the great New Orleans musician, that, he answered all these questions, but that one, he said, I won't go there. He wouldn't even go there. It was like, to me, it felt like he was saying, that's a little too voodoo for me, man. I'm not going there. So,
Okay.
yeah, and you know, I wanted to go into, because we brought up Proust, and you know, you said, "Oh, I love because we're playful," but I find that we really are like the snake eating its tail. We're playful and serious at the same time, Richard, and I really enjoy these discussions with you. And Proust asked the question, on what occasion do you lie? So I'll ask you that very question.
Boy, I like the paradox about lying. The liar, when the liar tells you he's lying, the liar says, "I'm lying."
Yeah.
That's the paradox. Because if he's lying, he's telling the truth. If he's telling the truth, he's lying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I go with Shakespeare, "To thine own self be true."
Yeah.
You know, part of being the fish and avoiding predators is, you know, lying is part of the survival. Um, you know, if I run into the neighbor who says, "Let's have a White Claw and trash talk liberals," I'm not about to tell him I'm the biggest liberal I know. I'm not going to tell him that. I'm going to pretend to be one of him. I learned, you know, David Letterman said everyone should work at a grocery store at some time in their life,
Yeah.
because you learn more about people in that job than just about any other job.
Yeah.
And so I ended my career working at the local grocery store on David Letterman's advice. And boy, was he right. And,
Yeah.
you know, part of the drill is you learn, they actually teach you how to interact with customers. It's part of retail, you know, behavior.
Yeah.
And they teach you how to deal with crises and dangers and, you know, unruly customers, but on a day-to-day basis, you just learn. And one of the most important things they teach you is never use the word "you." Once you use the word "you," it becomes personal to them. Even if you don't intend it as personal, they take it as personal.
Yeah.
And the danger is you may be intending it as personal, but so you're checking yourself by not using that word. And I've used that lesson everywhere else. If I'm having a discussion with someone, or if I'm writing to someone, I will edit that out. I'll rephrase it. It's our, or it's we, or it's they, or us. It's not you and me, because it becomes personal when it's you and me.
Yeah. That's good advice, man. I appreciate that, because I love Tom Waits's answer to, on what occasion do you lie? He said, I didn't know I needed an occasion.
Yeah.
And a woman who dresses the stars said, that's called manners. You know, most people
Yeah.
go, on what occasion do you lie? They go, to not, you know, avoid hurting someone's feelings. But here's the great singer Eartha Kitt. Truth is a theory that is constantly being disproved. Only lies, it seems, go on forever. Any thoughts on that line?
I'll throw another quote back at you. I love this.
Yeah.
Truth doesn't require participation. Lies do.
Yeah. Who's that?
I'll have to send it to you. I didn't write down.
Okay, we'll figure it out, but that is good. But I'm just saying, Earth is interesting because she goes, only lies, it seems, go on forever. And so we feed into it. My main question, Richard, is because you don't only come up with, here's the research. To me, you are a true revolutionary in that you go, there's something wrong, and here's some possible new strategies. Let's think about this. And how do we avoid normalizing lying? Because it seems to be, have humans always normalized lying, or is it on the rise right now immensely? And how do we avoid normalizing lying?
Well, lying, I think the whole question is moot because it's already normalized. It's already normal. Because when I avoid the word "you" out of politeness, out of manners, and I believe in manners as the social lubricant, is that lying? If I'm editing out the word "you," I'm only thinking about you when I do that edit.
Yeah.
But I don't want to push it in your face. So there are benevolent lies and there are malevolent lies.
Yeah.
Just like with intelligence. And we see malevolent lies every day in politics.
Yeah.
If I could get one aphorism across to the public, it would be, don't believe anything. I told my hair stylist this, my barber, in a presidential campaign, in any campaign, but definitely a presidential campaign in the US.
Yeah.
Well, never believe anything they say. Nothing. Don't believe any of it. Because political campaigns are about lying.
Yeah.
To get you to vote so they can have power.
Yeah.
Or make it easier for them to have power. I'm not convinced that our votes are what gives them the power. But it helps, and it helps them to lie about how they got power.
Amazing.
But even benevolent lying has become normalized now, because just look at my essay, my most recent essay. RFK Jr. and the first triumvirate.
Yeah.
Which is about the 2024 election. I start out talking about how, the convictions, the 34 felony convictions, they have a retroactive effect because he was convicted for crimes he committed before the 2016 election. And because of that, the moment he finished the oath of office, he was in violation of the oath of office.
Yeah.
So that's when the rule of law became zilch. The absence of the rule of law became normalized at that point, and that was 8+ years ago. So everything that's happened since has been the normalization of that, and it's just gotten seemingly worse. Boy.
But how do we avoid it, Richard? Because I wanted to go back to quantum mechanics in theory. Niels Bohr said the opposite of a fact is a falsehood, but the opposite of a profound truth may be another profound truth. So you're in a comprehensive awareness guy. You look at the big picture. You're willing to doubt yourself and understand why the other people think this way and you think this way. And avoid the word believe. I mean, you're don't believe anything because the word lie is in the middle of the word believe. It's right there. But how do we? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
I made a meme since I stopped cartooning. I've been making memes, but
yeah,
I think my memes look better than a lot of people's. But I have this one meme. I'll be posting it here in a few days because it's going to be International UFO Day, anniversary of Roswell. And it's just the famous picture that was on the poster in Fox Mulder's office in the X-Files of the UFO, the saucer. And it says, "I want to believe," the famous poster. Mine says, "I don't believe, I know."
nice.
And so, yeah, you're right. I'm surprised you picked up on that, because I haven't said it, but I avoid the word belief because I
Yeah,
learned early on that the more you know, the less you believe.
yeah,
Uh, but in answer to your question, um, I don't see avoiding it. I don't see us avoid. We can't avoid it.
yeah.
Uh, we can only survive it. And I tell people,
Wrong verb, right? How do we survive normalizing lies? Yeah,
how do we
that
survive
was,
it? Yeah, this over the top normalization of lies. Lies have always been normalized ever since Mark Twain said, "A lie can go around the world before you can tie your bootlaces." Um, so lies have always been normalized, and so
yeah,
one of our greatest struggles in life is learning to survive benevolent. I mean, well, the learning to use benevolent lies and to survive malevolent lies. But we swim in an ocean of lies, basically,
yeah.
and it's like I said, both beneficial and. But AI, AI is going to very quickly, if it's not already, some say it is already, will invent its own language. Languages, plural, that we have no hope of interpreting, except if AI chooses to teach us that language. So it will be able to talk to itself and other non-human intelligence. We're crickets. We're going to be crickets. So just, so
What's that
just
cricket? What's that cricket word you just taught me? I got to write that down. How do you spell that?
susurrus, Susserous, susurrus.
That's beautiful.
It means literally whispering, a whisper.
Yeah.
Susurrus. It could be no, it's susurrus, SU.
But
Um,
that's the dynamic right there, Richard. When people whisper, then it causes the listener to be more attentive. When you yell, you pull back and you're like, quit yelling at me. But if you whisper, the great experimental film scholar P. Adam Sidney just died, an amazing human being, wrote the best books on experimental film. And when I asked him, what's your favorite form of information? He said, pillow talk. And I was like, that's like whispering to your lover. That's an amazing dynamic. But Richard, I asked for 90 minutes and we're there. And I would love to do a part 4 because this is forever teaching me a lot. And I hope people are as fortunate as me and learn so much from you. You're really an articulate human and you're really able to help move the project forward in a positive manner. But why don't we close this one out? Because you touched on this a little, and I'd love for you to suss it out a little more. And it's the power quote by George Orwell, in regards to second thoughts from James Burnham. That I was really intrigued by that dynamic because it made me go to the etymology on the word power, which is the ability to act or do, strength, vigor, might, control, mastery, command. So, there's a lot to that. And then the quote you use also is, I love, is Henry Clay. I'd rather be right than president. Now, what's the dynamic of power in that quote? But, what did you learn from Orwell in his analysis of that James Burnham's power dynamics?
Well, what did I learn from that? Just read the introduction to my book, which is called, I posted it on my Substack and gave it a title. It was just, before it was just the introduction. It was really it started out as the introduction to my longest paper on the famous getaway car Rambler. But it became, because that I put it in my book, and I put it on Substack and called it Bartholomew. Wait, Bartholomew versus the Wheel.
Oh yeah,
And
okay.
that essay is a short essay because it's an introduction to a bigger paper, and it's the abstract. It originated as the abstract. My editor said, we need an abstract of this. It's too complicated. So I wrote this abstract. It's short. It comes out like a page and a half, 2 pages in print. And it goes through the overall implications of all the complex evidence that you're about to read. And it brings it down to who Burnham was and what he did, and how all of this culminated from James Burnham.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying, to answer your question, is Burnham got it right.
Yeah.
Orwell didn't believe him. Orwell was arguing against him. And that's why he had to have second thoughts about James Burnham. But Orwell was studying Burnham's thoughts on power right before he wrote 1984. So whatever prophetic, ahead of his time Orwell was in 1984, it was Burnham. It's Burnham's political theories that were right and that were predictive. And Burnham was a covert operative. He was one of the great covert operatives. Ended up as a editor on the National Review with William F. Buckley Jr. And oh my God, I go into that too. What's the relationship there? Boy, it's astounding. And if you read you can read my other essays on Substack, but man, my essays are only excerpts from my book and additional stuff on top of my book. But if you want the real inside detail, you got to read the book, man.
Yeah.
I know that's people don't do that. Well, they didn't do it anyway, but they really don't do it now. But I don't want it to become some people do, and I respect the people that will tackle a book.
But I think what you're saying, Richard, is something McLuhan learned from Finnegan's Wake and James Joyce, is that how do you turn a breakdown into a breakthrough, or a rejection into a redirection? And Moshe Feldenkrais said that it's literally possible to identify a weakness and turn it into a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. So it sounds like that's what George Orwell was doing, was taking this breakdown of his disagreeing or, challenging Burnham, and he turned it into him writing a book that's, important. So why don't we close with this one then? Tell us a weakness you turned into a strength, a breakdown that you turned into a breakthrough.
Perfect, because that's where my brain was going as you were telling me this. Well, let's go with a big weakness. Our belief that we're going to die.
Yeah.
That's a weakness. And I think we die when we believe we're going to die. Going back to belief as opposed to knowledge.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what death is. Death. It was Walt Whitman, Song of Myself. It said, death is nothing like we imagine it to be. And I think that's true. And it's harder to die than people think it is. And we look at, what we think of as death all around us. The many worlds interpretation has a whole different interpretation of that. But I think that we manifest a death. You see it. You can actually see it in operation in a small way. When people tend to die after holidays, especially after big holidays. It's like in January, there's a big round of that.
Yeah.
People tend to have heart attacks on Monday for the stress of going back to work, all that. So we can mentally manifest death. And if you think you're only going to live to 70 or 80, you probably are only going to live till then, because that's what you think.
Yeah.
So I came up with this. When I was at UT in 1983, we had the centennial. The University of Texas turned 100. I was working for the Office of University Publications, which was under the vice presidency over development, raising money. And we did all the promotional I was a graphic designer. I did a bunch of the promotional materials for the centennial. Well, they decided, we're going to make a time capsule. Let's make a time capsule. Let's put all of this centennial stuff that we created, tell the story of the centennial in the time capsule. And so they did. So a lot of my stuff is in that time capsule. And I have it on my calendar. I have an appointment to be at the opening of that time capsule, September 15th, 2083. I'll be 127. And so I see my age. I see my sense of how long I want to live is twice my current age. My goal of how long I want to live is always twice my current age. Do you know that Superman in Superman comics is always 29? That was a thing. That was a rule. No matter when you're drawing Superman, he's always 29.
Wow.
So he came to Earth 29 years ago, whatever today is that he came to Earth 29 years ago. So they can't have Superman aging, becoming an old man. So my deal is I see myself living to at least twice my current age. And that's the weakness I turned into a strength.
That is
because
so.
I am manifesting my longevity. And when superintelligence gets here, forget dying. You can live I tell people you can live as long as you want. Just get through the next few years. If that long, it could happen tomorrow. Singularity could happen tomorrow. Just get through the next short period. Get through this rough time. Just survive it. However you can. Be the fish avoiding predators. Get through it. And because when superintelligence gets here, all bets are off. Everything gets cured. There's no more oligarchy. There's no more money. You can work if you want to. You can go into a hologram and work in a grocery store if you want to. Maybe even be good for you. But you'll be able to do whatever you want, whenever you want. You won't need money. Superintelligence will provide everything. And when I mention that to just your average person, like my checker, when I go to the grocery store, you can see the fear in their eyes, especially when I say there will be no more money. They can't. That's like, wow. They can't conceive of that. And most people can't, because we're so gaslit to be dependent on this way of living. But yet, the enlightenment is coming. The great age of Aquarius is coming.
Love it.
It's imminent. It is imminent.
Yeah, Richard, it's so beautiful because Emmett Grogan wrote Ringolia in San Francisco. He says everything should be free. And in a couple other things you evoked there was Paul Krasner saying, I only believe in reincarnation in one of my past lives. But I actually have a friend who said, whatever happens to you after you die is whatever you believe happens to you.
And you know what my answer to that is? That's one of the questions. That's one of Stephen Colbert's questions. What happens after you die?
Yeah.
I have a one-word answer. Groundhog Day.
Very good.
The most truthful movie ever made about the true nature of time is Groundhog Day.
Yeah, it's really well put. Richard, it's really been a pleasure and an honor, and I can't wait for part 4 because we can keep going deeper and deeper into all these things you probe in your essays, you did in your political cartooning. And believe me, I want to be there September 15th, 2083. That's in Austin, Texas.
It's a date. It's in Austin, Texas. Probably, why wouldn't it be? Because, you know, even if it's the ruins of the university, which it should be on one end of campus, the LBJ library should be in ruins by then.
Yeah.
If I had my way, if my life's work prevails, that will, if it does survive, it will be a monument to the evil, the greatest evil of our times.
Yeah. You know, I salute all these people who got us to meeting each other. Max Good was turned on to me through Mike Mosier, who teaches in Saginaw, Michigan. And Max Good turned me on to Joe Green, and Joe Green turned me on to you. Richard, thank you so much for your time and energy and all that you do. Really love this time together, and I appreciate how you've taught me a lot in moving this project forward. As Dave Emery would say, grounds for further research. Thanks, Richard. I'm going to hit the broadcast button, but I know this will never end, and we'll keep talking beyond 2083.
Very good. Very good.
Thank you.
Looking forward to 2083. Yes.
Yes.